Hello everyone and welcome to this DCD Talk. I'm James Raddings, Digital Portfolio Lead here at DCD, and today we'll be talking about navigating global supply chains, certainly a very interesting topic at the moment. I'm joined by Mendez Quintero, who's global head of data centers over at Hilti, and thank you very much to Hilti for sponsoring this session as well. So great to be with you, Daniel. Before we kick off, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role at Hilti?
Yeah, James, thank you very much for having me. Happy to be here. So I've been working in construction the last 20 years with Hilti in different roles, mainly in marketing and sales. The last 5 years have been very focused on data centers. First as a director of Europe, and then since 2.5 years ago, I've been leading the data center team in Hilti globally.
Nice. So, delving into the topic, how to navigate global supply chains in a current quite uncertain world. How does what's happening in the world translate to data centers, and how are you seeing that?
Yes. Look, there's a few sectors where this matters more than in data centers. As you know, speed is key in data center construction. And scale and predictability has become a critical requirement for the business. And these supply chains are impacting directly on the time to market for the business owners. Today, with all these geopolitical tensions and supply constraints and labor shortages, that mix with a super demand that we are living today because of the artificial intelligence and the cloud growth, the ability to deliver reliably has become a real competitive differentiator for the business owners.
Yeah, and that speed to market you mentioned as well, with it being such an expensive game and a lot of data centers needing to be having built yesterday. It's we can't really afford any delays, can we? I suppose looking at some of those, delving into a little bit more about the challenges that you're seeing, could you walk us through the main challenges that data centers are facing today?
Yeah, so basically I see three main areas of challenges that they are all influenced by these external conditions that we are seeing, the geopolitical tensions, the supply constraints, and all of these topics. First is the demand. The growth is accelerating. We see, especially for AI and the hyperscale business, that it's a really difficult place to forecast. We see announcements every day of new data centers being built everywhere. But then because of all this search of pipeline, timelines and priorities constantly change, and that creates a lot of pressure across the system. The second part is the supply itself, materials, logistics, and also the lack of skilled labor. It remains being a constraint, and often it's driven by external factors, right? All these geopolitical tensions that we were talking about. There are some regions in the world that have some imbalances in terms of capacity and how to build data centers in some parts of the world. And then, of course, the things that we've been living last year with the global trade, everything that is happening around tariffs. The third part is always the execution, because even when you have the supply chain secured, the projects still face delays due to coordination, complexity, a lot of design changes, rework, and productivity challenges on site. So when you combine internal complexity with all this external volatility, the word that comes all the time is uncertainty. And uncertainty is going to be the new norm for the industry.
Yeah. And that external volatility and uncertainty that you mentioned, how should companies respond to that?
Well, when you have uncertainty, what you need to build basically is predictability. And for that, you need to consider it in very early stages of design in the project. When the project starts very early to be conceptualized, is when you see the risks that are actually created, right? If you don't think about things like constructability, material availability, or installation productivity early enough, then you are building the risk way before the project starts, right? What we see is that the traditional model of we design first, then we procure, and then we execute, this is no longer valid. And that's why we think that the fastest data centers are going to be the ones that remove all these portions of uncertainty before the construction begin. And you do that by embedding the supply chain into early stages of design and by engineering solutions that are going to build this certainty in the project. It comes down to a few key areas where companies can make a real impact.
Yeah. So in sort of more practical terms, I suppose, as well, where should organizations focus today to improve that predictability, which, as you mentioned, is absolutely critical to meet delivery timelines and actually get stuff built?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there has to be a design-driven approach, bringing engineering capabilities earlier into the process. A key enabler here is design for manufacturing and assembly, or what it's commonly known as DFMA. We increasingly see DFMA becoming a standard practice in data center construction because it supports more standardized pre-engineered solutions that reduces the variability of the project and improves constructability. By moving more work in a controlled environment and simplifying the installation on site, DFMA is helping really to address two major constraints. One is the supply uncertainty, and the other one is the labor availability. Second, working more closely with a smaller number of the right partners, because moving away from purely suppliers that are giving you transactions and sending you materials to site, and instead of that, having a better collaboration with partners that can support your projects globally, but they can also help you in design decisions, in execution, and in project performance. There is a third one, that is the productivity in execution. And we need to think how we can install faster, safer, and with less mistakes and errors. And the last one is transparency, to have better visibility on materials, on workflows, and execution progress helps teams really take better decisions. So ultimately, what you need to move is from managing the supply chains and reactively to really design and engineer for performance, right? And embed, as I said before, the supply chain as part of your design and standardization approach. And this is where really DFMA it's going to become a critical part of your design.
Yeah. And can DFMA work at scale as well? Because some of the scale of these projects are absolutely huge, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, DFMA is becoming important because data centers need to move fast, as we said before, but they also need consistency. If every project is treated as completely unique, you are starting running the wheel all over again. And at the end, with some of these global owners of these buildings, they are trying to build the same building everywhere, right? So if you don't go for a standardized approach, you are creating a lot of variability. And that is where the risk comes from. DFMA at the end, it's helping to standardize what can be repeated and moving more work into control environments. So that makes at the end the installation simpler on site and of course faster. It's true that requires more effort upfront, but by doing more work upfront, you avoid rework, coordination issues, installation problems on site. And this will help you to avoid bigger delays later. For me, that's why DFMA matters. It helps reduce uncertainty and makes delivery much more predictable at scale. But even when design is optimized, execution becomes the real test, because that's where productivity plays a critical role.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, it's like with the DFMA, I always think of the phrase, measure twice, cut once, and it gets ahead of a lot of problems before they rear their head. You mentioned productivity as a key factor as well. I suppose, what does that actually mean in practice?
Yeah, productivity has become one of the defining constraints in data center construction. And for me, that I've been almost 20 years, I would say that it's in the construction in general lacks of productivity since decades ago. And this is becoming quite visible in data centers. So even if you have the supply available, you have the materials, the projects usually slow down because there are inefficient and complex installation processes. So improving productivity is not only about the speed or throwing more people at the problem, like I see in some regions. It is also about simplifying execution, make it more repeatable, more consistent, and less dependent on variability. This is where, in our view, innovation plays a key role, and we are seeing more and more engineered systems, better tools, and even now we see increasing levels of automation with robots that reduce installation time and minimize errors. And often, relatively small improvements in productivity can have a very big impact on the overall project schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. You touched upon the kind of role of suppliers as well, and that evolution from, providing products to becoming true partners in delivery. How can suppliers contribute to better visibility and the predictability point that you mentioned when delivering projects?
Yeah. For us, the role of the suppliers is clearly evolving from delivering products to really becoming part of the ecosystem and how projects are actually delivered. That means that suppliers need to get involved earlier, supporting design and helping make installation more predictable. And at the same time, they can bring much better visibility into what is happening around availability, sequencing, and then some potential constraints. That is also why we see a shift toward working with fewer, more capable partners, especially those who can support your projects globally. Because every additional interface between suppliers, it's creating complexity side. You can imagine that if every project you have different suppliers, different sources to buy the same materials at the end, you need more coordination, more handovers, and more potential points of failure. When you work with a smaller number of partners who understand the full system end to end, they can support you both in design and execution, and they can simplify the project and reduce that risk. And I'll give you an example of my own company, Hilti. We offer engineered solutions. And every time we design a solution for a client, that allows us to plan exactly where and when materials are needed and creating a strong baseline for execution. Then it's true that schedules change, but then we are not starting from zero, and you have already removed a large part of the supply risk.
Yeah, and having that pool of suppliers that you know and trust and can deliver the projects and the different materials or whatever it might be just at the right time. I mean, as well, Daniel, you've been in this industry for, you mentioned about 20 years. What do you think leaders should be doing differently?
Well, in this case, in data centers, I will focus on three priorities. As I said, first, you need to integrate your supply chain and engineering thinking earlier in the design phase. You need to think about systems that are embedded in your building so you can predict better how your data center is going to be built. Second, you have to standardize as much as possible wherever is possible, particularly through DFMA, that we see this is a key lever for success in the building. And third one, to build stronger partnerships with the right players. The common factor at the end is you need to have early alignment with your suppliers, with your partners, with the ecosystem and your stakeholders that are going to help you to build your building. And the earlier you align the design, supply, and execution, the more control you are going to have on the outcomes.
Nice. So early partnership building and visibility and deliver things on time. Sounds perfect. Have you got any other final thoughts to conclude?
Yeah, well, the first one is that uncertainty is not going away. When every time there are changes, people tend to think that one day we will come back, but we never come back to how it was originally. And uncertainty is going to be the new norm. The real issue that we see in most of the projects is that the projects are still designed to have a traditional supply chain. And when that assumption breaks, which it often does, and I've been in many projects, visiting many projects where there are delays because we are working on with a traditional construction approach, the entire delivery model gets in trouble. And all the efforts then is to focus on how to react faster. And the teams that are on the field, they spend a lot of energy on this. When in reality, what it should be, it's about how we design projects that are more predictable from the start across the supply, the engineering, and the execution. And I really believe that companies that will lead this part of construction will be the ones that remove uncertainty before it reaches the job site. At the end, we were talking about the speed of construction as being the number one key for the data centers. And the best factor of speed is predictability. The more predictable you build, the faster you will be commissioning the building.
Yeah. Oh, sounds great. And I think with data centers, they really do sit at the intersection of so many different industries with different supply chains, different ways of working, and aligning that early doors seems like a really, really neat and fresh approach. So, well, thank you very much for your time today, Daniel. Thank you to everyone watching at home, and thank you to Hilti for sponsoring. Always a pleasure, Daniel, and looking forward to seeing how this plays out, and see you soon.
Thank you so much, James. And yes, I'll see you soon.